We're ready to get started with this afternoon's program. Welcome to this luncheon event with Syndicated Columnist Deroy Murdock. I'm Jim Lakely. I'm the Director of Communications at the Heartland Institute, and on behalf of Nikki Comerford, Kaylee Ducala, Taylor Smith, Antoinette Lacaneri, and the rest of the Heartland staff, thank you for being here today, and thank you to them for the hard work I'm putting on this event this afternoon. Let me tell you a little bit about the Heartland Institute, because I do see some fresh faces in the audience today. The Heartland Institute is a 28-year-old national nonprofit research and education organization. In shorthand, we're a think tank, like the Heritage Foundation or the Cato Institute or the Brookings Institution. And our mission is to discover, develop, and promote free market solutions to social and economic problems. And three things make the Heartland Institute unique. First, we target state, county, and municipal officials as our primary audience. There are about 7,300 state elected officials in the United States and another 8,400 county and municipal officials who we identify as important policymakers. This year they're going to raise and spend about $3 trillion in taxpayer money, which is about as much as the national government spent in 2008. And we're very influential with this audience, and it's obviously an audience that's growing in importance as budgets continue to get bigger and bigger. Second, we produce 6 public policy newspapers. These are 20-page tabloid-sized publications, examples of which are on the table here, and I encourage you to get one on your way out. We send those to all of the national and state level officials. Those publications are budget and tax news, environment and climate news, finance, insurance, and real estate news, healthcare news, infotech and telecom news, and school reform news. And these publications are also unique. They're designed to be read and used by busy elected officials who don't have time to read an entire white paper. And they are very influential. We did a survey last year of randomly calling elected officials, state elected officials across the state. 79% of state legislators and 66% of county and municipal officials read at least one of those publications in 2011. And 45% of state legislators said that reading that publication changed their mind on a very important public policy issue. So it's an example of how Heartland's unique approach of reaching out to elected officials is effective. And third, the Heartland Institute acts as a clearinghouse and marketer for the work of other free market think tanks like the Heritage Foundation and the Cato Institute. We feature their work in those publications, at our events, and on our websites. And we also operate a unique website called PolicyBot, which is an online database and search engine containing some 25,000 articles and studies from 250 think tanks and advocacy groups across the country. We also obviously host events like luncheon speeches, like this one that you're at today, and to the something really large, which is our international conferences on climate change. Those conferences have attracted nearly 3,000 guests from 24 countries, and we're hosting our next event, as you can see from a card on your table, right here in Chicago at the heels of the NATO Summit, May 21st through the 23rd. We also have a government relations department. That staff made nearly 1.4 million contacts with elected officials in 2012. And the public relations department, which I'm in charge of, we contact journalists, we send out op-eds, we try to get our experts quoted in news stories. We contacted journalists 410,000 times in 2011. Resulting in more than 1,000 hits in the mainstream media, with a combined audience of 88.5 million subscribers and nearly 4,000 hits online in blogs and websites. Speaking of websites, we've also revamped our web presence in the last year and launched apps for the iPad. The Heartlander, which is a beautiful app that lets you read the latest from free market news, written by staffers from the Heartland Institute plus freelance writers. They give a free market perspective to the issues of the day. You can find that by searching, if you have an iPad, searching the Heartlander in the iTunes store. And we also have an iPad app version of PolicyBot. So everywhere you go, you can have the latest free market research at your fingertips. So 1.2 million people visited our websites in the last 12 months. We have 55,000 fans on Facebook. Deroy has 0. But that's by his choice. The things we post on Facebook get about 300,000 impressions a week. And Heartland also has several Twitter accounts using social media to keep people up to date with what we're doing. We have nearly 6,000 followers on several accounts, and that's always growing as we speak. Let me just tell you quickly about 3 other major events we have coming up in the recent future. in the near future, I should say. The International Conference on Climate Change, again, there's a card on your tables that talk a little bit more about that. That's on May 21st to the 23rd. Václav Klaus, who is speaking or attending the NATO summit, he's the president of the Czech Republic. He's going to be our featured speaker at dinner on the first night. And we also have Jim Sensenbrenner is confirmed to be a speaker. Senator James Inhofe is a perhaps speaker this year. We're going to have about 40 to 50 different scientists and economists and politicians coming to speak about climate change. And if you know anything about the Heartland Institute, our view on climate change is from the skeptical side, not on the alarmist side. So it's a perspective that is very much needed in the public debate. On June 8th, CPAC Chicago is taking place at the Donald E. Stevens Convention Center in Rosemont. The Heartland Institute is a main co-sponsor of that event. We expect to have anywhere between 2,000 to 4,000 conservatives and libertarians. In fact, it would be the single largest convergence of conservatives and libertarians in the state of Illinois ever. So we're very much looking forward to that. Information about that, again, is on our website, and I hope to see a lot of you there at that event as well. And finally, on August 9th is our anniversary benefit dinner this year. It's at the Navy Pier, and our featured speaker is going to be Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker. Now, Scott Walker should be coming off his, I would presume, his victory on the recall, so it should be a very, that's going to be happening in June, I believe, so it'll be a very much a can't-miss speech by Governor Walker. If you've ever heard him speak, he's definitely worth seeing. So we hope that you will consider coming to our benefit dinner in August. And for more information about what the Heartland Institute does, including projects like Operation Angry Badger, which has to do with the Wisconsin recall, educating children in K through 12 and getting the politics out of climate science and putting science back in. That's another project that we have underway this year. Free to Choose Medicine, which Vince Gagliotti in the back there is directing for us. It brings Milton Friedman's free market approach and libertarian principles to the prescription drug area. All these projects we have planned for 2012 are available in our QPR, which if it's not on your table is going to be available limited to supply on the way out. But again, all of these issues are actually on our website, and we encourage you to go to heartland.org to find out more about what the Heartland Institute does. And of course, putting on events like this, inviting Deroy to come speak with us, the other events that you had heard about in all of our publications, none of that is possible without the support of donations from 1,800 individuals that we have, and we hope to raise a budget of $7 million this year. But that's not possible unless we get the support of people like you, and if you are a donor to the Heartland Institute, I thank you and ask you, if you can, to maybe give more this year. And if you are not a donor to the Heartland Institute, I encourage you to be one, and to learn more information about it, you can speak to me, and Joe Bast, our president, is also here today as well. And with that, I would like to introduce Deroy Murdock. Pardon me. Our speaker today. Deroy is a contributing editor with National Review, National Review Online, a senior fellow with the Atlas Economic Research Foundation in Washington, D.C., and a media fellow with the Hoover Institution on War, Revolution, and Peace at Stanford University. And he's also a nationally syndicated columnist with Scripps Howard, so you've probably seen his pieces in the newspapers near you. His column, This Opinion Just In fact, is printed in some 400 newspapers across the country, including the New York Post, the Washington Times, the Orange County Register, all the newspapers you really should be reading. Deroy is also a Fox News contributor, and he was also on the founding staff as a commentator at MSNBC, which we won't hold against him because that was before. He's appeared on ABC's Nightline. He has sparred with Bill Maher on Politically Incorrect before that show was pulled. Have you been on the HBO show yet?
Not the HBO.
Okay.
HBO version.
On CNBC, CNN, C-SPAN, NBC Nightly News, and other TV and radio programs across the country. And what is certainly one of Deroy's greatest professional disappointments, he was named runner-up of the worst person in the world on NBC's Countdown with Keith Olbermann. And after writing an article, that was after writing an article titled 3 Cheers for Waterboarding. 3 Cheers being a real inspirational thing for Deroy. So 3 Cheers for Waterboarding, and he only got runner-up for that, so I actually shudder to think what actually won, if that could not win. But Deroy wrote in that piece that waterboarding should, quote, be something which every American should be proud. Well, again, I don't know how you didn't win. Whatever happened to that Olbermann guy Anyway.
You went on to great noise elsewhere.
Yes, yes. I believe there's a public access cable show in Aurora, Illinois, which he's trying to get on these days. But
right after Wayne's World.
That's right. You have to clean up the basement first, I suppose. Some more honors for Deroy for writing Lefty, It's Cold Outside, an op-ed he penned on Democrats, liberals, and socialists who opposed the theory of so-called global warming. Murdock was dubbed Muckraker of the Day on the February 2nd, 2009 edition of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue with David Schuster on MSNBC. Yet another person Deroy tangled with, or that person tangled with Deroy, whose career has now dissolved. So I think a lesson there is to not mess with Deroy Murdock. In conjunction with the Manhattan Institute, Deroy has collaborated with former New York Congressman Herman Badillo on One Nation, One Standard. That's a book. He's also contributed to the book Standing Athwart History 24/7, 1 Year in the Life of National Review Online. One of my favorite websites of all time, by the way. Economic Strategy and National Security. The Race Card, White Guilt, Black Resentment, and the Assault on Truth and Justice. And Black and Right, the bold new face of black conservatives in America. And now here to talk about yet another provocative subject and a must-needed topic of discussion, a lecture called 3 Cheers for the 1%. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Deroy Murdock.
Well, thank you very much, Jim. I appreciate that introduction, very warm and very recent. I want to say what a joy it is to be in the Heartland Institute's new offices. You've been here, I think, a couple of months now, having moved from LaSalle to 1 South Wacker here, more spacious and comfortable than the other offices I remember. I've been a big fan of the Heartland Institute and its publications. And as a journalist, I often have the opportunity to... I often have the opportunity to use Heartland's information in my op-ed pieces, radio appearances, TV appearances, and so on. So you're a big boon to my efforts in journalism, and I thank you for that. It's great to be among you and your audience here. Jim has been very helpful in putting this together. Joe Bass, it's always great to be with you and your staff, and Nikki Comerford and Keely Dracula, I want to make sure I say that correctly.
Close enough.
Very good. Have also been very helpful, so thank you to them. And I also want to say thank you to the Federal Society Chicago Lawyers Chapter for co-sponsoring this event. Chris Hagee has been helpful in making that happen, and it's always good to be among right-thinking attorneys here in Chicago. I want to say one more thank you. Here's the title of my talk, 3 Cheers for the 1%. And thank you to my best friend, a financier in Manhattan by the name of Brett A. Schissler, who has been helpful in putting together some of the research and graphics related to this presentation. I'm going to move this just to have a little bit more room right there. Okay. So, as you see me standing here as somebody who's in visiting Chicago, your wonderful city, which I enjoy very much. I'm here from New York City, and the thing that most strikes me about Chicago every time I visit is that you people pick up your trash. It's extraordinary. We're not really quite capable of that in New York. I wasn't there at the time, but when New York City was designed, they forgot to put in alleys. So we put all of our trash out on the sidewalk, whereas you guys put it either in your alleys or underneath the loop and the downtown area. So that's very impressive. So anyway, here's this guy from New York City who's in from Chicago saying 3 cheers for the 1%. And some of you are probably thinking that I'm here basically to defend my portfolio and my vast holdings and so on. And in fact, here's where I live and where I'll be heading back. This is actually in Asheville, North Carolina. This is the Vanderbilt's Biltmore House, built by George Vanderbilt. It is the biggest home in America, 250 rooms, 175,000 square feet under one roof, which would be 6 acres under one roof. And it's beautiful and well worth visiting. If you ever have the opportunity in Asheville, North Carolina, well worth taking a side visit. In fact, where I live is here, nothing quite so spectacular. I'm in the second to the top apartment there in the East Village in New York City, just below Union Square. So maybe you're thinking I'm here defending my mom and dad's portfolio, which at some point I imagine I will inherit, and here's where my folks live. As happens, another Vanderbilt mansion. This is the Breakers in Newport, Rhode Island, and it's beautiful, and I have been there as well. I went as a tourist, not as a resident. In fact, my mother and father lived in a place called Temecula, California, which is a suburb of San Diego, basically, about an hour north of San Diego. And it's a comfortable house, but it's not the Vanderbilt house or the Biltmore house. And that car you see there is not a Ferrari, that is a Ford Focus. And that is the car that I rented, I think, a couple Christmases ago when I took that picture. And if you watch Fox on Sunday nights, it may look kind of familiar to you. That would be the Simpsons home in Springfield. So what I'm going to talk about today is what we've been seeing in American political discourse over the years, but really over the last few months, I think it's become more intense. And that is this sort of proletariat versus the bourgeoisie holding down the proletariat workers, and this real class warfare rhetoric that we've been getting in American political discourse. And it looks like this poster from 1933, where you see the worker with his shirt sleeves rolled up, and he's taking his pickaxe and giving it to that capitalist good and hard, as you can see, as his top hat tumbles off of his head. I know a lot of wealthy people, and really never have seen one wear a top hat. But for some reason, that's part of the iconography here. And what you see here in 1933, even though it's 2012, you're seeing and hearing this sort of discourse and seeing this kind of imagery in the United States in 2012, and I think it's really kind of remarkable. And it starts at the very top of our political structure with Barack Obama, who said back in October 2008, "I think when you spread the wealth around, it's good for everybody." So it's all this financial distribution concept. Once he was elected president, April 2010, he said, "I do think at a certain point you've made enough money." It's really an extraordinary comment for anyone to make, particularly president of the United States. July 2011, he said, "The debt ceiling should not be something that is used as a gun against the heads of the American people to extract tax breaks for corporate jet owners," said the president of the United States as he got off of his jet. Very interesting. And you've heard Obama talk about corporate jets a lot, so much so that the head of the International Brotherhood of Machinists asked him to stop, because these jets don't build themselves. They're actually built by workers, many of them unionized machinists. And he said, "Mr. President, will you please get off the corporate jet industry, or my unionized machinists are going to be out of work." And so he's calmed down about it in the last few months. "If asking a millionaire to pay the same tax rate as a plumber makes me a class warrior, a warrior for the working class, I will accept that. I will wear that charge as a badge of honor," Barack Obama said September of 2011. Again, an extraordinary comment to hear out of the mouth of a president of the United States. December of last year, he said, "Some billionaires have a tax rate as low as 1%. 1%. That is the height of unfairness." Well, the Washington Post that day took a look at the comment by President Obama and wrote the following: "An administration official conceded the White House had no actual data to back up the president's assertion. The president is also relying on a suspect statistic about billionaires paying as little as 1% in taxes. Even if true, it is clearly a rare event. Moreover, it is certainly surprising that the White House would rely on such a dubious, unverified source for a major presidential address." And as a result of these statements, the Washington Post gave President Obama 3 Pinocchios, the long extended nose, and that represents significant factual error and/or obvious contradictions. This is from December of last year. And just a couple weeks ago, President Obama said, "I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth." Apparently he was born with a microphone in his mouth. And there he is. And it continues with members of the U.S. Senate. Here we have Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont. He calls himself a socialist, not me. That's his description. "When the rich get richer, they say, 'I am not rich enough. I need to be richer.' What motivates some of these people is greed and more greed." Senator Sanders also said, "Greed is, in my view, like a sickness. It is like an addiction. We know people on heroin. They can't stop. They need more and more." Speaking of more, here's Michael Moore, a man who's been sliding by on his good looks for decades now. Michael Moore said, "They're sitting on the money. That's not theirs. That's a national resource. That's ours." Says a man who lives in a penthouse apartment. And here we have Roseanne Barr, October of last year. "I first would allow the guilty bankers the ability to pay back anything over $100 million of personal wealth, because I believe in a maximum wage of $100 million. And if they're unable to live on that amount, then they should go to the re-education camps. And if that doesn't help, then be beheaded." So we've gone from zero to Robespierre in a matter of about a year or two. And then you see bumper stickers like this: "Eat the rich, the other white meat." "Kill and eat the rich." Those vicious knives and forks there. And this delightful one: "Class war, we have found new homes for the rich," under grave markers. Now imagine if somebody put together a poster like that and it said, "We found new homes for the Jews. We found new homes for the blacks. We found new homes for the gays." Whoever put forth that communication would find his or her career over. the person would be ridiculed, the person would be shunned, and deservedly so. But you say here, we've found new homes for the rich under tombstones, and a lot of people think, well, that's kind of cool. And I think that is reprehensible, and this is totally inappropriate political dialogue in this country. We're better than that. This graffito says, burn the rich, the condos, and it's got a little anarchist sign, that A with the circle around it. Keep your eye on that symbol. Back in November of 2010, an arsonist burned down this home, a $500,000 home which was under construction in a place called Sandwich, Massachusetts, and the police had to show up and put out the fire. And the place burned to the ground. It was basically a home for a wealthy person who paid the money to build it, and it was destroyed. Well, about 1 week later, similar neighborhood in a place called Marston Mills, Massachusetts, also in the Cape Cod area, the police found in December 2 an incendiary device that had been placed inside this wealthy home. And fortunately, the device did not go off. It did not, in fact, burn the house, but the attempt was to burn it down. At this home at Trotter's Lane, just like the home that burned down in Sandwich, Massachusetts, somebody had written the graffito, F the rich, in both places. So the idea behind F the rich here was to burn their houses down. You had one burned to the ground through arson, and this one, fortunately, not burned down, but another case of attempted arson. So some people take these messages to heart and engage in very, very ugly behavior. Here's the case of a man by the name of Clay Duke, who showed up in December 2010, and he presented himself at the school board in Panama City, Florida. So he attended a meeting of the Panama City School Board with a gun in his hand. And he got some spray paint, and he put that anarchy sign on the side of the wall, which you saw on the wall of that graffito earlier. And he held the members of the Panama City School Board hostage at gunpoint. And they opened fire and shot at them. Fortunately, they were quick, and they ducked under their tables. And then somebody, as you may recall the videotape of this, a woman came over and knocked him over the head with a purse. He fell to the ground, and then he took the gun, turned on himself, and killed himself. Well, police then looked online and discovered his online manifesto, in which he wrote, "I was just born poor in a country where the wealthy manipulate, use, abuse, and economically enslave 95% of the population. Our masters, the wealthy, do as they like to us." So some of these people take this rhetoric to heart and do things like open fire on people. This is London in August of last year. You may recall the fires that broke out all across London and burned for 3 or 4 days, causing tremendous destruction. This was a family-owned furniture business that opened in roughly 1850, and this family built furniture, sold furniture for a better part of 150 years or so. And all in one night, 5 generations of British family wealth went up in smoke in those riots. This is a picture of a woman whose building was burning to the ground, and she jumped out of a window and was caught by the people on the street, and she fortunately survived, but she came very close to being killed in these fires, which injured several people. In fact, there were a couple of deaths as well. And the BBC asked folks who were out engaging all this arson, "Why are you doing this?" And one of them said, "We're just showing rich people we can do what we want. So let's put the rich in their place by burning down major parts of London, England." This is deadly, deadly, deadly serious folk stuff. There's nothing cute about it. Now, when I talk about defending the 1%, I'm not talking about defending people like Bernie Madoff or more recently John Corzine. Bernie Madoff is a thief. He's a crook. He robbed something like about $30 billion, if I have the number correct, from his clients, including, believe it or not, Elie Wiesel, the Nobel laureate who won the Nobel Peace Prize some years ago. Elie Wiesel was a boy who was at Auschwitz, and Elie Wiesel survived Adolf Hitler and survived the Holocaust, only to go on and be robbed by this man, Bernie Madoff. He's in prison. He deserves to be there. I hope it's uncomfortable, and he's getting all the pain he deserves in federal prison, I hope. When I talk about defending the 1%, I'm not talking about companies like AIG and others that take government bailouts. I'm a capitalist. I believe in capitalism, but I believe in capitalism on the way up and capitalism on the way down. Not what we do in this country these days, which is capitalism on the way up and socialism on the way down, which is if you make profits, you enjoy them privately, and if you have losses, you socialize them across the entire nation. That's not my perception of how a country ought to operate its economy, and I think that if you take a risk as a capitalist, you should enjoy the rewards, but also suffer the consequences if your company goes south. And when I defend the 1%, I'm not talking about corporate welfare either. If you are in the peanut business, the ethanol business, or the sugar industry, you're probably somebody who's benefiting very much from government subsidies and all sorts of supports. And I think if you want to be involved in peanuts, ethanol, or sugar, great, but use your money, not our money. So these are not the sorts of things I'm discussing when I defend the 1%. This is Congressman James Clyburn of South Carolina. He is the number 3 Republican, or number 3 Democrat in the House of Representatives after Nancy Pelosi and Steny Hoyer. And he said that 98% of the American people are carrying this tax load while the other 2% seem to be getting away scot-free, and that's not fair. And this is a meme you hear over and over and over again, that the 1% or the 2% just aren't paying their taxes, and they're just basically along for the ride with the other 98% pulling them along. This is almost exactly 180 degrees upside down, as I'll show you with these statistics right here. This is the top 1%, the evil, nasty, awful, disgusting top 1% we keep hearing about on television and the radio. And according to the IRS figures, in order to be in the top 1%, you needed to make at least $343,000 and change. And on average, these people made about $960,000 in adjusted gross income. So 344,000 or so was the floor, average about 960,000. So here's the top 1% and the bottom 99%. And the top 1% in 2009, these are the most recent figures from the IRS, earned about 18% of national income. So of all the money we made, the top 1% made about 18% of that money. Well, guess what? They paid 37% of income tax. So it seems to me the fair share, if you're making 18% of the money, you ought to pay probably 18 or so % of the income tax. In fact, they pay double that. So when people say, you know, are they paying their fair share, I throw the question right back at them. They are 1% of the filers are making 17% of national income and paying 37% of income tax. And that seems pretty fair to me, but some people still say that's not fair. And it's very interesting on the news when people say the rich need to pay their fair share. They'll say, what's that number? If it's not 37, is it 40? Is it 45? Is it 60? Is it 82? Is it 98.3? They never will give you a number. They say fair share, fair share, fair share without giving the number. And I think the reason is if they had to talk specific numbers rather than just slogans, they would have to confront these data. And if the American people saw these figures, they would say, well, that looks pretty fair to me. Now you take a look at total effective federal tax rates by income range. The most recent figures of these go back 5 years, 2007. For the average of all taxpayers, that was 20.4%. And what you see in these numbers when you actually look at the figures from the IRS, the more money people make, the more money people pay in tax. Exactly the opposite of all the slogans we're hearing, basically the lies we've been hearing. People in the top 10% in 2007 paid about $103,000 in taxes. The top 5% paid about $141,000. And the top one, forgive me, these are the actual income floors. That's the income floors at which those percentages kick in. But the percentages were, the top 10% paid about 27% effective tax rate, the top 5% about 28%, and the top 1% at 29.5% effective tax rate, while the average taxpayer was paying about 20.4%. More income, more tax. In 2009, the amount of money raised by the income tax by the IRS was $866 billion. So IRS 1040 collected $866 billion. You see that the top 1% paid 37% of that, $318 billion. The top 5% paid $508 billion out of that number, or 59%. And the top 10% of income tax filers paid 70% of income tax, equal to $610 billion out of the $866 billion collected by the IRS. Now the bottom 50%, you take all taxpayers, rank them from number 1 all the way down to the bottom. The top 50% paid a grand total of $20 billion, or 2.3% of income taxes collected. When you hear about unfair, you never hear about the fact that 50% of filers paid a grand total of 2.3% of taxes collected by the IRS for the income tax. That never comes up in the discussion when the President of the United States and other people lie to you on this issue. You look at the effective tax rate for 2009. Again, people making $20,000 to $30,000 are paying about 2.5% income tax rate. People making $100,000 to $125,000 are paying about 10%. And then at the far end, people making $1 million plus, they're paying 24.1% in 2009. Now, some people say, fine, okay, yeah, rich people pay income tax, but poor people pay payroll tax, Social Security tax, these other things. Well, if you put them all together and you look at the effective tax rate on combined federal income, payroll, corporate, and death taxes, combine those taxes together, here again, more income, more taxes. People making between $20,000 and $30,000 are paying an effective tax rate of about 6%. At the far end, those people making $1 million or more are paying 29.1% of their combined money in income, payroll, corporate, and death taxes. More income, more taxes. Now what's interesting also are the people, about 59 million of them, who file taxes but don't pay anything. So they send their 1040 forms in, but they don't owe any income tax whatsoever. Their corporate or their total tax rate is basically 0%. And that led Scott Hodge, who is the president of the Tax Foundation, to say the following statements before the Senate Finance Committee. He said the following: "We need to have a national discussion over whether it is fair or equitable to have millions of people enjoy the benefits of civil society but contribute nothing to its costs. I believe that it is bad for democracy and bad for the fiscal health of the nation to have so many Americans with no skin in the game." Continued, "Good citizenship requires that we contribute at least something to the basic cost of government if we're going to enjoy the benefits of it." I'll take questions later. And I think Scott Hodge raises a very good point. We have about roughly 50% of the country that doesn't pay income tax. And so when we have a national discussion about whether we should do this with the CIA, or should we take this policy on healthcare, what should be our stance on education, you have half the country that has no skin in the game. And the question is, are they really participating fully in what we do as Americans? I also think there's a potential voting effect on this, which is once we have 50 or 51% of the people voting, with the other 49% paying the bills, if someone stands up and says, look, I want to give you free health care, I want to give you free education, you get a free lake house if you want it, I'll give you a month or 6 weeks off vacation, and this gentleman over here in the tie is going to pay for it. All those in favor say aye. Aye. There you go. It's pretty easy, isn't it? Well, I think it's not good for him, but not bad for the rest of us, right? I think we rapidly are approaching the situation where you're going to have people, a majority of voters, voting to have other people give them free stuff. And once that happens, I think we will be well on the road to serfdom. I think this cartoon nicely summarizes the president's thinking. I want to allow the half of Americans who pay no taxes to bear the burden of the other half who aren't paying their fair share. That makes sense to you, then so does this policy. Now, who are these awful 1% people? We keep hearing about how hideous and greedy and monstrous they are. Again, these are people making $343,000 change annually in household income. Well, they include people like White House Chief of Staff Jack Lew, who worked at Citigroup, and he made $1.1 million before joining the administration. We have former Chief of Staff William Daley, who's the son of your former Mayor Richard Daley. He was at J.P. Morgan Chase, making $8.7 million. And former Chief of Staff Rahm Emanuel, who was at Wasserstein Perelman Company, and over a 2-year period, he made $16.2 million. I'm not sure whatever happened to that guy. But I do think there's a lot of hypocrisy on the Democrats, many people on the left who complain about the awful, terrible 1%, when in fact many of them fall into that exact category. Now, Bernie Sanders here, our good friend from Vermont, said the following: these people who are worth hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe they've got to go back to the Bible or whatever they believe in, understanding that there is virtue in sharing, in reaching out, that you can't get it all. And again, this is the theme, that these rich people aren't paying anything, they're just taking this money, running off with it, and the hell with everybody else. Well, there's a very interesting study that's done every other year called the Study of High Net Worth Philanthropy. And this is put out every other year by Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, in conjunction with the Center on Philanthropy at Indiana University. And every other year they survey a large sample of wealthy people, usually about 800 or so respondents. And these people have household incomes greater than $200,000 without counting their homes. The average respondent made $10.7 million. So these are multimillionaires with an average income of about $11 million, 800 of them. And they asked them questions on what they do with their money. Well, it turns out that 98.2% of these very rich people in the top 1% give to charity. 98.2% of these folks give to charity. Very interesting compared to the rest of the population, of which about 65% give in charity. So among the general population, it's about 65% are involved in charitable giving versus almost 100% among these multimillionaire, very rich people. Now you're thinking, okay, so these people give to the opera, they give to the symphony, they give to these very elite, elegant type of causes where they can hang out with their rich friends. Well, where's their money go? The number one place where these wealthy people donate their money is in basic needs. We're talking about funding for people who are in dire straits, who desperately need help, like the Salvation Army, like the Goodwill, like homeless shelters, taking care of people who desperately need resources to participate in society. Number two is education, giving money to universities and schools and elsewhere where kids can learn and get the skills they need to prosper as productive American citizens. Number 3 is the arts. Yes, they do give to the opera and the symphony, etc., where they can hang out with their rich friends, but they do that after they take care of students and after they take care of people who have very few other options. They also give to religious organizations, to health causes, etc., etc., and even down to the bottom, giving vehicles. Some of them give their cars away to charities, which then sell them or auction them off and raise money that way. Now, another thing that these people do is they volunteer. Now, it's very easy to sit in your office on Whacker and write a check and drop it in the mail and say, all right, I've done my part, now I'm going to go back to my greedy company. It takes a lot more to roll your sleeves up and actually support a charity and go in and volunteer and put your actual human presence behind the causes in which you believe. And in 2009, 78.7, almost 80% of these people, worth $10 million or more on average, volunteered. Now, we're talking about dropping by a cocktail party for a couple hours? No, we're talking about an average amount of volunteer time of 307 hours. 307 hours of volunteer time on the part of people making, on average, $10 million, approaching 11 million. Excuse me. So these people are volunteering 307 hours on average. Now, you're probably doing the math and trying to divide that by 24. Make it a little easier on you. So 307 volunteer hours for each of these people equals 38 8-hour shifts or 13 donated 24-hour days. We're talking about almost 2 full weeks of donated time, 24/7 around the clock, to support their causes, or 8-hour shifts, 9 to 5, 38 8-hour shifts, which would be actually 5 weeks of 8-hour shifts. Truly an extraordinary amount of time. And you never hear about this. These folks never get any credit, you never hear a word about it, and all you hear is how greedy and awful and monstrous they are, and no credit for the amount of time that they put in on top of the donations they make. Now, these include such people as Ken Langone, who's the co-founder of Home Depot. He also is on the board of directors of the New York Stock Exchange, and he's a very wealthy man. He's worth multiple billions of dollars. I believe he's the son of either a painter or a plumber. So he has done very well in one generation away from blue-collar work. Well, Ken Langone decided to donate $200 million to New York University, and he gave it to the medical center with one stipulation, and only one, which is he wanted his name on it. So it's now the NYU Langone Medical Center. And other than that, they may use their $200 million gift from him as they please. They're using it for medical student education, putting in new clinics, seeking new cures, and making sick people feel better. And again, only one string attached, which was put his name on the front door. We have Paul Allen here, one of the co-founders of Microsoft, along with Bill Gates. Among other things, he gave a lot of money to create the Experience Music Project in Seattle. And you can go in there. I've been in the museum. It's terrific. They've got all sorts of exhibits on Jimi Hendrix, rock and roll, lots of guitars and other things like this. And he's opened this up with his money. If you look on the side, you can see the monorail popping out of the side there. And this is a gift to the people of Seattle and the people of America from Paul Allen. And here we have a gentleman by the name of Andrew Carnegie, one of the great robber barons of the 19th century, so-called robber barons. And he made a lot of money basically making the steel for the railroads, and he became very, very wealthy doing that. And he built something in New York City on the corner of 57th Street and 7th Avenue called Carnegie Hall about 105, 110 years ago, and this remains one of the great cultural meccas in the United States of America. Now, not all of these people are terribly savory souls. This is somebody who was very prosperous but had a very, very dark side. This is Henry Ford. From all we can gather, Henry Ford was not a very nice man. Henry Ford is a big anti-Semite. Before World War II, before Adolf Hitler declared war on the United States in 1941, Henry Ford thought that Hitler was doing some pretty good things in Germany and maybe we ought to give him a chance. So there's a lot of darkness to Henry Ford, but despite any darkness in his heart, he still did a whole lot of good despite that. He created something called the Model T, which made it possible for people with limited means to have the advantage of mobility through automobiles. It used to be before the Model T, if you wanted to drive a car, you had to get yourself a beautiful Daimler-Benz touring car at tremendous expense. He made it possible for the middle class to buy cars and travel where they wanted to go. Prior to the Model T, most Americans are born, lived, and died within about 20 miles of their birthplaces. After the creation of the Model T, people were able to drive all around the country, and mobility became something absolutely fundamental and core to the American experience. He also produced or created the assembly line, which was very good for his company and very good for industry as a whole. And you can see it in this picture outside the Ford Motor Company in Detroit. The amount of jobs he created, the amount of people whose lives he changed, not just at this facility, but many others. And we're talking about thousands and thousands of people who benefited from his industriousness, from his creativeness, and his inventiveness. And of course, that didn't stop with the Model T. The Ford still makes beautiful cars like this terrific Mustang today. Now, what did they do with their money? They obviously shared a lot of it with their investors and benefited from it personally. But the Ford family put a lot of money into something called the Ford Foundation, which is here in New York City on 42nd Street, and it operates today. The Ford Foundation started in 1936, and here's Henry Ford on the right and his son Edsel Ford, after whom the Edsel is named. And it originally began with a gift of just $25,000, and the money was designated to be used, quote, all for the public welfare, unquote. And so the Ford Foundation set out to give money away to all sorts of causes. Such as initial gift of $25 million to launch Lincoln Center, which today has the New York Philharmonic, it's got the New York Ballet, it's got the Metropolitan Opera House, Vivian Beaumont Theater, Jazz at Lincoln Center. I think it has something like 12 different independent and autonomous artistic groups. I go there a lot, I enjoy it. I'm a member of the Lincoln Center Theater, and I recommend all of you when you visit New York to go to Lincoln Center. It's a terrific place, largely started with money from the Ford Foundation. 1968, the Ford Foundation put up money to launch MALDEF, the Mexican-American Legal Defense and Educational Fund, and the National Council of La Raza, which are both very active in the minority and Hispanic rights areas. 1982, they gave money to the National Council for Research on Women. Next year, they gave money to 283 public radio stations across the country. 2010, they gave $25 million for HIV/AIDS research and to fight that disease. And in the year 2010, they gave away a grand total of $525 million, almost $500 million given away by this private organization. And what's interesting, if you take a look at the groups I mentioned, I don't believe the Heartland Institute gets any money from the Ford Foundation, nor does the Cato Institute, nor does the Heritage Foundation. The Atlas Economic Research Foundation, with which I'm a senior fellow, doesn't get any money from the Ford Foundation. The Ford Foundation is basically the Fort Knox of the left. They basically support left-wing causes. Not the causes I support, but it's a private organization. They're perfectly free to support these organizations. And I think many of the same organizations who denounce the dirty, nasty, disgusting 1% are being funded by the money of the dirty, nasty 1% at the Ford Foundation. In fact, Henry Ford II, who was on the board of the Ford Foundation, said the following in his resignation letter when he quit the foundation. He wrote that the Ford Foundation exists and thrives on the fruits of our economic system. The dividends of competitive enterprise make it all possible. A significant portion of the abundance created by United States business enables the foundation and like institutions to carry on their work. In effect, the foundation is a creature of capitalism, a statement that I'm sure would be shocking to many professional staff people in the field of philanthropy, wrote Henry Ford II when he resigned from the board of the Ford Foundation. Not very happy about the left-wing causes that it was supporting. And I find this kind of fun. We hear from the Occupy Wall Street people how terrible these disgusting and hideous corporations are. And as they're marching down the street, you see cell phone by Samsung, video camera by Panasonic, this person holding up this protest board, poster board by Weyerhaeuser, written on it with a black marker made by Sharpie. Here's somebody with some orange hair, dye by Clairol, shirt by Gap, etc. If it were not for these awful, irresponsible, reckless corporations, these people would be marching down the street completely naked. And at the bottom it says, we deserve more from these greedy corporations. Join us afterwards at Starbucks. This is a picture from Great Britain in, I think, the late 60s. And the man, anybody know the man on the left there?
John Cleese.
That's John Cleese. John Cleese went on to great fame and fortune in Monty Python's Flying Circus. And the two gentlemen on the right are a comedy duo called the Two Ronnies. The Two Ronnies, exactly. Very, very funny. And the reason I show this picture is just to illustrate something that, an obsession of the left, which is all about equality. All to be equal, everything, all about the leveling. I'm for equal justice under law, which are the words chiseled across the top of the Supreme Court. I believe in equality before the law, and the government should treat us all equally as citizens. People on the left are interested in something different, which is equality of outcomes. We all end up the same at the end of the game, not the beginning of the game. And I think that if you pursue that in economics and income, it would be as dangerous as trying to make these guys all the same height by perhaps cutting off John Cleese at the knees and then putting platform shoes under the other Ronnie there so they all can be the same height, which is kind of the approach that people on the left seem to take. And here again you see James Clyburn, Congressman from South Carolina, focusing on this idea. The gap continues to grow wider between those who enjoy great wealth and those who struggle to get by with little thought of ever getting ahead. They're very focused on this income gap concept. Instead of believing that a rising tide lifts all boats, class warriors act as if they want to drain the lake so all the boats are equally grounded. So wrote Michael Goodwin in the New York Post last January. I think that puts it very well. If you're interested in income equality, take a look at what Charles Lane wrote in the Washington Post. Which European country recorded the biggest decrease in inequality between 1985 and 2008?
Greece.
That would be Greece. And how's that turned out for the Greeks? Not all that well. I give this lecture to law students through the Federal Society, which is kind enough to have me on their lecture circuit. And I ask them to consider this thought experiment. You can consider this thought experiment too. Let's say you're out looking for a job, and you have two options. Job offer A on the table. You would make $50,000, and your boss would make about $55,000. So your boss is making about 10% more than you, so the inequality is manageable. It's only 10%. That's not so bad. Well, here's job offer B. You make $500,000, and that bastard in the corner office makes $1 million. He's making twice what you are. 100% inequality. Could anything be more unfair than that? This is the height, the epitome of unfairness. Now, all those for job offer A, please say aye. All those for job offer B, please say aye. How about that? And when I show this to law students, they kind of go, wow, that's interesting. So maybe the gap isn't really what we ought to focus on. We really should be focused on where do we get the floor. I'm not interested in dragging people out of the penthouses on Lakeshore Drive and throwing them down on the sidewalk. I'm interested in taking people who are living on the south side of Chicago on low incomes, and how do we get their incomes up? How do we push the floor up, not how do we bring the roof down? And too much of the left's rhetoric is about bringing the roof down and not pushing the floor up. And that's where we as free marketeers need to put the focus. How do we get the floor up? We do it through school choice, we do it through education reform, we do it through entrepreneurship, we do it through deregulation, we do it through enough tax reform so the economy, which is now stalled at about 2% a year, growth actually picks up and starts accelerating at 5, 6, 7, 8%. I'd love to see this economy grow as robustly as China's does. And if that happens, you'll see people on the floor moving up, and all the discussion about the gap and all this other stuff, I think, will start to evaporate. Winston Churchill put it very well. He said, the inherent vice of capitalism is the unequal sharing of blessings. The inherent virtue of socialism is the equal sharing of miseries. I think that puts it very well. Anyone know what this is? This is the Korean Peninsula. It kind of looks like New Jersey, but that actually is the Korean Peninsula by day, taken by satellite overhead. And there's the Korean Peninsula at night. And there you see the bright, thriving, shining lights of Seoul, the lights of Busan. The sun goes down and the people start having they continue to have a great time. And there's income inequality there. You have rich people in their penthouses, you have people in studio apartments not making as much, people maybe living in their parents' basements. So you have income inequality of all sorts. And here in the north, where you have income equality, everyone's making kind of the same. They're pretty equal. Not a lot of gap there at all. And the sun goes down and the country goes pitch black. This, I think, epitomizes the difference between the Occupy movement, the down at the 1% movement, etc. A land of inequality here, a land of income equality on the top. These words are attributed to Abraham Lincoln, a son of Illinois. You cannot strengthen the weak by weakening the strong. You cannot help the poor man by destroying the rich. You cannot further the brotherhood of man by inciting class hatred. Very wise words then, and very wise words today. Thank you very much.